"Dad, they didn't give me any food," the girl told the millionaire over the call and what he did next. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Let's begin. On the morning everything changed, Robert Miller was on a video conference with international investors in his glass-walled office on the top floor of a corporate building in London. On the laptop screen, graphs rose and fell as numbers were debated in 3 languages. He barely listened. It was just another funding round for one of the startups in his portfolio, a cycle that had repeated almost automatically in recent years. But that morning, something broke the cycle. His personal cell phone vibrated insistently next to the keyboard. 3 missed calls, all from the same residential line, although a strange, unregistered number caused him unease. Robert hesitated before answering. Deborah, his wife, knew he disliked interruptions during work hours. She, a respected woman in London's social circles, president of a children's charity, prided herself on her discretion. When he finally answered, he did not hear his wife's sweet, confident voice, but rather a fragile, fearful whisper that squeezed something in his chest he didn't even know still existed. It was his 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, and what she said, in a choked, hesitant voice, was something that silenced him internally. "Daddy, they didn't give me food." In that instant, Robert's entire universe destabilized. The billion-dollar negotiation, the pride of being a leading technology entrepreneur, the agenda packed with commitments, everything turned into background noise. The girl spoke softly, almost as if she were hiding, explaining that she had used Deborah's office phone, which she had managed to unlock with a password she had silently observed for weeks. She couldn't be heard. She said she had been locked in her room for days, that the only thing she ate was biscuits and water, and that whenever she asked for food, she was called a liar and punished. Robert tried to absorb what he heard, but each word was a blow. Without explanation, he ended the video conference, ignored the executives and messages, and with trembling fingers began searching for flights back to London. He was in Edinburgh, attending a private business networking event. He cancelled everything, called his driver and boarded the earliest possible flight. During the journey, he mentally replayed past conversations with Deborah. All the time she explained Sophia's apathy as a difficult phase. All the time she said the girl needed boundaries. The number of household staff who had been replaced in recent months. Deborah's refusal to let him call their daughter at random times. Everything that seemed normal began to jumble with suspicion. Upon arriving at the mansion in Kensington, one of London's most prestigious addresses, he was met by silence. He used his key and entered without announcement. The house was impeccable, as always. Deborah had gone out. Robert went straight upstairs to his daughter's room. The door was not locked, but the atmosphere exuded abandonment. In the corner of the bed, curled up, Sophia slept, clutching a worn teddy bear, too thin for her age. With deep dark circles under her eyes and loose pajamas, she seemed smaller than he remembered. Beside the bed, a glass of water and an almost empty packet of biscuits. The image was too absurd to be real. He picked her up carefully, startled by how light she was. In the kitchen, the absurdity was confirmed. The cupboards were impeccably closed, but one of them, the largest, had a new, shiny padlock, locking away all basic food items. The refrigerator was full of expensive wines, imported cheeses, and neatly organized containers by category, but there was no sign of children's food, no fruit, no prepared meals. He was still trying to understand what he saw when Deborah arrived, impeccable as ever, carrying designer shopping bags. She feigned surprise at seeing her husband. She said she didn't know he would be back so soon. When he pointed to the padlock, she smiled disdainfully. She explained, as if it were obvious, that Sophia was going through a food tantrum phase, that she refused healthy foods, that she threw away entire meals, that, because of this, she had taken measures. Robert's anger rose silently, but firmly. He took the keys from Deborah, unlocked the cupboard, and prepared something simple for his daughter, who woke up weak but ravenous. He watched with pain the silent desperation with which she ate, as if each bite could be snatched from her hands at any moment. This was not a spoiled child. This was a hungry girl. That same afternoon, He took Sophia to Great Ormond Street Hospital, a leading pediatric care centre. Tests showed a clear picture of moderate malnutrition, vitamin deficiency, and signs of dehydration. The pediatrician, Dr. Lucy Evans, recommended observation and hydration for at least 24 hours. More than that, the protocol required notification to local children's services. Social worker Carla Roberts visited the room later that day, took statements from the father and the medical team, and informed him that a formal investigation would be opened. Sophia, even debilitated, managed to clearly recount the punishments, the days without food, the shouting, the times she tried to get something hidden and was called a thief. She also told about the previous cook, Mrs. Zola, who had been fired shortly after giving her a plate of pasta in secret. Robert, until then a prisoner of his own omission, began to reorganize everything. He moved with Sophia into his own apartment in Notting Hill, away from the environment controlled by Deborah. He called his assistant, Julia, to handle logistics and hired lawyer Dr. Felicity Lane, a family law specialist. The instructions were clear. Record everything. Document every examination, every step, every witness. Days later, the media began to stir. Deborah, a beloved public figure, gave an interview to Hello magazine saying she was a victim of a smear campaign by her absent husband who wanted to manipulate their daughter to gain an advantage in a possible divorce. She painted herself as a dedicated and disciplinarian mother. Blogs and social columns reproduced her version. Robert remained silent, until journalist Thomas Scott, from a local investigative newspaper, sought out Robert with deeper information. Deborah had been the target of old complaints at a shelter where she volunteered. The complaints had been filed away, but they described exactly the same behavior: food deprivation, favoritism, and aggressive reactions disguised as discipline. In the Notting Hill apartment, father and daughter tried to rebuild a routine. Sophia had been enrolled in a new school, more welcoming and with a humanistic pedagogical approach, on the recommendation of child psychologist Dr. Maria Day. Initially, the girl seemed insecure and apprehensive, especially at mealtimes. She asked for permission before each mouthful and hid pieces of food in her pockets, afraid of going without later. Robert watched everything with a tightening in his chest, blaming himself for not having noticed the signs earlier. "I was always absent," he confessed to Julia, his assistant, as he reorganized his schedule to prioritize his daughter's well-being. "I ended up delegating everything to Deborah, believing it was best for Sophia. I trusted blindly in someone who seemed perfect to others, but cruel to her own daughter." Julia, who had worked with Robert for years, had witnessed her boss's complete transformation. The man who once ran from one meeting to another, answering emails even during family dinners, now rejected commitments that interfered with picking up his daughter from school. He was rediscovering what it meant to be a father. "You were always a good father. You were just distracted," Julia consoled. "Now you need to look forward and rebuild your relationship with Sophia." Meanwhile, Mrs. Zola, the former cook, was located. She now worked at a bakery in the borough of Hackney, East London. Initially reluctant, she eventually agreed to speak with Dr. Felicity Lane. In the small apartment where she lived with her retired husband, she recounted the daily life in the Kensington mansion. "Mrs. Deborah wouldn't let the girl eat anything out of hours, even when the little one came home from school hungry," she said, wringing her hands in the apron she hadn't even taken off after work. There were times Sophia was punished without dinner for trivial things, like leaving a toy in the wrong place or taking too long to bathe. "And the father, Mr. Robert, didn't notice any of this?" the lawyer asked, noting every detail. "He was almost never home," the cook sighed. "And when he was, Mrs. Deborah was a different person. All affectionate with the girl serving the best dishes. Sophia even seemed like a different child near her father. Happier, you know. Mrs. Deborah knew how to pretend very well." Mrs. Zola recounted how she was summarily dismissed after Deborah caught her secretly feeding Sophia during a punishment that had already lasted 2 days. "She called me a traitor, said I was sabotaging her daughter's upbringing. She sent me away immediately, without even paying my rights properly. I was afraid to report it. I needed the money, and she threatened to harm me if I said anything." Mrs. Zola's testimony was appended to the case now before the family court. Robert had obtained temporary custody of Sophia, but Deborah had hired one of London's most powerful law firms, led by Anthony Vance, known for his aggressive methods and influential network. The strategy was clear: question Sophia's sanity, suggest that the girl fantasized due to emotional neglect from her absent father, and paint Deborah as a victim of a husband who, sensing the end of the marriage, used their daughter as an instrument of revenge. Vance's first move was to request a psychiatric evaluation of Sophia, arguing that the girl might be influenced or even exhibiting childhood mythomania. Robert felt his blood boil when he read the request, but Dr. Felicity calmed him. "It's exactly what we want, Robert. Sophia has psychological support now, the reports are clear. This evaluation will only strengthen our position." Indeed, the child psychologist who saw Sophia twice a week had meticulously documented the girl's food-related trauma, as well as the post-traumatic stress symptoms she exhibited when the subject was food or her mother. The frequent nightmares, the constant fear of displeasing, the tendency to hide food, everything indicated a pattern of continuous psychological abuse. Meanwhile, in the luxurious apartment in Mayfair, Deborah received constant visits from important figures in London society who showed solidarity with the wronged mother. Among them, the influential socialite Regina Maxwell, president of the Happy Futures charity, where Deborah served as fundraising director. "Don't worry, darling," Regina said, sipping French champagne. "No one in their right mind will believe that you, who dedicate your life to underprivileged children, would mistreat your own daughter. This is an absurdity that could only have come from your husband's sick mind." Deborah wiped away a meticulously rehearsed tear. "I'm shattered, Regina. Sophia is my life. I can't sleep thinking about what she's going through away from me, manipulated by Robert and his lawyers." What Deborah didn't know was that, at that exact moment, journalist Thomas Scott was interviewing a former employee of the Happy Futures charity. Vanessa Oliver had worked as an educator at the institution for 3 years before being dismissed without clear explanation. She had long kept disturbing records of Deborah's behavior with some of the children at the shelter. She always chose 1 or 2 children for what she called special treatment, Vanessa recounted, usually the prettiest and most communicative ones who looked good in photos for the charity's promotion. These children received gifts, outings, constant attention, but if they disobeyed any of her rules, the punishment was always the same. They went without snacks, sometimes without lunch. "Was this reported to the charity's management?" Thomas asked, recording every word. "Several times," Vanessa sighed. "But Mrs. Regina and Deborah are like 2 peas in a pod. My complaints always came back as a misunderstanding or envy. When I insisted, I ended up being fired." As these revelations emerged, Sophia slowly began to regain not only weight but also confidence. At her new school, she made friends with Clara, the daughter of teacher Patricia Stone. The 2 girls had grown close during recess when Clara offered Sophia half of her snack. Instead of accepting, Sophia froze, almost panicking. "You don't have to give me your snack," she whispered. "I don't want you to get punished." Patricia, observing the scene, immediately realized something was wrong. After speaking with the school administration, she arranged a meeting with Robert to better understand Sophia's situation. It was the beginning of an unexpected support network. Patricia was divorced and understood like no one else the challenges Robert faced as a newly separated single father. She offered guidance on routines, suggested children's books that addressed topics like food insecurity and divorce, and sometimes even helped by looking after Sophia when a work emergency was unavoidable. "You know, Robert," she said during a coffee after they both dropped their daughters off at ballet class, "when I got divorced, I thought it would be impossible to balance work and single motherhood, but you find a way. The important thing is the quality of time together, not the quantity." Robert smiled, feeling for the first time in months that he wasn't completely lost in this new life. "Thank you for everything, Patricia. Sophia talks about you and Clara all the time. You've been a light in the middle of this storm." The look they exchanged lasted just a second longer than necessary, but it was enough for both to realize that something new was beginning to emerge there amidst the crisis. The hearing for temporary custody was scheduled for the following week. Robert spent sleepless nights reviewing documents with Dr. Felicity, while Deborah intensified her media campaign as a wronged mother. In an interview for a high-rating morning show, she even cried live, pleading for the return of her beloved daughter. What she didn't expect was that behind the scenes, more pieces were moving against her carefully orchestrated theater. Mrs. Zola had not been the only employee to witness the mistreatment. Charles Peters, a driver who had worked for the family for 2 years, had also contacted Robert's defense with disturbing accounts. "Once I had to pick up the girl from school because she was feeling unwell," he told Dr. Felicity. "When we got home, Mrs. Deborah didn't even let Sophia in. She said it was an act to get out of piano lessons and left her in the car with a fever for almost an hour while she talked on the phone. Then she told me to take the girl back to school, even though she was sick." The driver also confirmed the food deprivation and added an important detail. "Mrs. Deborah always instructed me not to comment anything to Mr. Robert about Sophia's routine. She said he worked a lot and shouldn't be bothered with domestic matters." The day before the hearing, Robert was especially nervous. Sophia noticed her father's tension as they had dinner together. "Daddy, are you worried?" she asked. Playing with the rice on her plate, she still had difficulty eating without anxiety. "A little, sweetie," Robert admitted, trying to smile. "I don't want to go back to Mummy's house," Sophia said, putting down her fork and looking at her hands. "I'm scared." Robert felt his heart clench. He took a deep breath. "Sophia, look at me." He waited until his daughter looked up. "I promise you won't go through that again. Never again. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will protect you." The girl seemed to consider the promise for a moment. Then, with a gesture that surprised and moved Robert, she extended her pinky finger. "Pinky promise." Robert swallowed the lump in his throat and intertwined his pinky finger with his daughter's. "Pinky promise, the most sacred one there is." That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Robert received an unexpected call. It was Thomas Scott, the investigative journalist. "Mr. Miller, I've got something that could change everything tomorrow. We need to talk urgently." An hour later, sitting in a discreet cafe near his apartment, Thomas showed Robert a set of printed documents. "These are internal reports from the Happy Futures charity. Vanessa Oliver gained access before she was fired and kept them for security. They clearly show a pattern of your wife's behavior with other children, very similar to what Sophia reported." Robert examined the papers with growing attention. There they were, documented in official reports that had later been altered or filed away: food deprivation, favoritism of some children over others, controlling behaviors disguised as discipline. In one case, a 6-year-old girl had been hospitalized with dehydration after being forgotten without water during a trip to the zoo as punishment for speaking without permission. "Why did this never come to light?" he asked, shocked. "Regina Maxwell has powerful connections," Thomas explained, "and your wife is excellent at fundraising. Together, they ensure the charity receives millions in donations. No one wants to stir that hornet's nest." "And why are you helping me?" Robert questioned, still suspicious. The journalist hesitated. "My younger sister went through something similar," he finally revealed. "Only she didn't have anyone to defend her. She grew up with severe food-related trauma. Today, at 25, she still struggles with anorexia. I can't watch another child go through the same when I can help." Robert clutched the documents to his chest. "This could save my daughter. How can I thank you? Use these documents tomorrow, and then, when it's all over, let me tell this full story. The public needs to know that child abuse doesn't just happen in poor or dysfunctional families. Sometimes it's hidden behind perfect facades, in mansions with swimming pools and imported cars." The next morning, as he prepared for the hearing, Robert received another unexpected visit. Patricia Stone, Sophia's teacher, was at his door, visibly nervous. "Sorry to show up like this," she said. "But I thought you needed to see this before the hearing." It was a drawing Sophia had made in art class. It showed a small girl, alone in a room, looking at an empty plate, while an adult figure, clearly female, held a key. In the corner of the paper, in childish letters, Sophia had written, "When I was bad and didn't obey." Children speak through art what they can't always express in words, Patricia explained. The art teacher was worried and showed it to me. I thought it might be important. Robert carefully hugged the drawing. It is important, Patricia. Thank you very much. Before leaving, she hesitated at the door. Robert, I just wanted to say, good luck today. Sophia deserves a happy ending to this story. He nodded, too emotional to respond. As he closed the door, he realized that perhaps it wasn't just Sophia who deserved a new beginning. Perhaps he also had that chance. With Thomas's documents, Mrs. Zola's testimony, the driver Charles's account, and now Sophia's revealing drawing, Robert felt more prepared to face what was to come. He knew that Deborah would not give up easily, that she would use every resource at her disposal, money, influence, emotional manipulation, to maintain her immaculate public image. But now he had something he didn't have before, documented truth. And, more importantly, he had the unwavering determination of a father who finally understood his most important mission. As he closed the folder with the documents and prepared to leave, he looked at the newly placed photo frame on the coffee table. It was a picture of Sophia at the park, taken last weekend. For the first time in months, she smiled genuinely, her eyes sparkling as she held a cotton candy larger than her face. "For you, Sophia," Robert whispered, touching the photograph with his fingertips. "For you, I will go to the end." The Royal Courts of Justice in central London was particularly busy that morning. Robert arrived accompanied by his lawyer, Dr. Felicity Lane, and Julia, his assistant, who would be responsible for Sophia during the hearing. The girl had been left at school, as usual, to maintain her routine as normal as possible, as advised by the psychologist. In the third-floor corridor, Robert spotted Deborah arriving with her entourage, lawyer Anthony Vance, Regina Maxwell, and two other women he recognized as influential social columnists. All were impeccably dressed, as if attending a charity event, not a hearing that would decide the future of a traumatized child. Deborah wore a discreet but elegant dress and light makeup that enhanced her calculated fragility. "Ready?" Dr. Felicity asked, noticing her client's tension. Robert merely nodded, clutching the folder with the documents. They entered the courtroom and took their seats. Judge Claire Nelson, known for her firm stance and experience in family law cases, was already in her seat, reviewing documents. She was a middle-aged woman, with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and shrewd eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. After the initial procedures, the hearing began. Deborah's lawyer was the first to speak, with his impeccable and intimidating rhetoric. "Your Honor, we are facing a classic case of parental alienation," Vance declared, gesturing dramatically. Mr. Robert Miller, after realizing his marriage was in crisis, decided to use his daughter as an instrument of revenge against my client, an exemplary mother recognized for her work with underprivileged children at the Happy Futures charity. The strategy was clear. Paint Robert as a bitter husband and Deborah as the victim of a defamatory campaign. Vance proceeded to present photos of Deborah at charity events, surrounded by smiling children, spoke about her impeccable reputation, and questioned how a woman so dedicated to children's causes could mistreat her own daughter. "The accusations are absurd, Your Honor. The girl Sophia has always been a child with difficult eating habits, as proven by the pediatric reports we have attached to the process. What we have here is a spoiled child who, influenced by her father, transformed healthy boundaries into alleged mistreatment." When it was Dr. Felicity's turn to speak, her approach was completely different. Without flourishes or dramatics, she went straight to the point. "Your Honor, we are not here to judge Mrs. Deborah Miller's public image, but rather to protect a 7-year-old child who was found in a state of moderate malnutrition, as attested by the medical reports from Great Ormond Street Hospital." She then presented the medical examinations, photos of Sophia in the hospital, the psychologist's reports documenting the food-related trauma, and followed with the testimonies of the former household employees. The judge listened attentively, making occasional notes, her face remaining impassive. "And now, Your Honor, I would like to present a new set of documents," Dr. Felicity continued, taking the folder Robert had handed her moments before. These are internal reports from the Happy Futures charity, which demonstrate a pattern of Mrs. Deborah's behavior with other children under her care. A murmur ran through the room. Vance immediately rose and, protesting, "Your Honor, these documents were not previously included in the process. This is an irregular maneuver by the defense." "Calm down, counsel," the judge replied in a controlled voice. "I will examine the documents and decide on their admissibility." As the judge examined the papers, Robert observed Deborah from across the room. For the first time since he had known her, he saw something he had never noticed before, an almost imperceptible tremor in her perfectly controlled gaze. Fear. She was afraid. Regina Maxwell leaned in and whispered something into Deborah's ear, who merely shook her head negatively, without taking her eyes off the documents in the judge's hands. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, the judge adjusted her glasses and addressed those present. "I will admit these documents as evidence. They are pertinent to the case and demonstrate a pattern of behavior relevant to our assessment. Let us proceed." Dr. Felicity then explained the content of the reports. Records of food deprivation applied by Deborah to children in the shelter. Documents that had later been altered or filed away due to Regina Maxwell's influence, and the particularly serious case of a child hospitalized after a punishment similar to what Sophia reported. Vance's expression changed. The experienced lawyer realized the case was taking an unexpected turn. He tried to regain control, arguing that the documents could be falsified, that there was no proven connection to Sophia's case, that it was all just an unfortunate coincidence. "Your Honor, I request an expert examination to verify the authenticity of these documents," he demanded, his voice less confident than before. "I have already ordered that examination." "Counsel," the judge replied, "the documents will be verified, but I must say they bear all the hallmarks of authenticity upon initial review. We will continue the hearing considering the other evidence already confirmed." The judge then called social worker Carla Roberts, who had interviewed Sophia at the hospital. Her testimony was direct and professional. The minor exhibited clear signs of food deprivation and psychological trauma associated with food, she reported. During the interview, she demonstrated extreme fear of being punished for talking about her situation and repeatedly said she didn't want to be bad. When asked what being bad meant, she explained it was asking for food when it wasn't time or taking food without permission. The social worker's testimony was followed by that of psychologist Dr. Marina Day, who had been supporting Sophia since her discharge from the hospital. She explained how the girl exhibited behaviors typical of children who had suffered abuse, hiding food, asking permission for basic activities, constant fear of displeasing adults, and recurrent nightmares related to punishments. Then, the drawing Sophia had made at school, brought by Patricia that morning, was presented to the judge. The simple but deeply disturbing image had a visible impact on the room. This drawing, made spontaneously during an art class, demonstrates how the child is still processing the trauma she experienced, the psychologist explained. The smaller figure, clearly representing Sophia, looks helplessly at an empty plate, while the adult figure holds what appears to be a key, likely representing the padlock that locked away the food, as reported by the minor. At the end of the presentations, the judge requested a 30-minute recess to analyze all the evidence before making her decision on temporary custody. Robert went out into the corridor, feeling physically and emotionally exhausted. Dr. Felicity accompanied him, offering a glass of water. "Are you all right?" she asked. Genuinely concerned. "How could I not have noticed?" Robert murmured, more to himself than to the lawyer. "How could I not have seen what was happening under my own roof?" "Robert, abusers like your wife are masters at creating facades," Felicity replied, her voice soft but firm. "They know exactly how to manipulate appearances and perceptions. You're not the first father to ask yourself that question, believe me." Across the corridor, Deborah was in a heated discussion with Vance and Regina. Her gestures, normally controlled and elegant, were now abrupt and nervous. The mask of perfection was beginning to crack. When everyone returned to the room, the tension was palpable. Judge Clare adjusted her glasses and looked firmly at those present before announcing her decision. After analyzing all the evidence presented, including medical reports, psychological reports, witness testimonies, and the recently presented documents, I have sufficient elements to make a preliminary decision, she declared, with a firm voice. Temporary custody of the minor, Sophia Miller, will remain with the father, Mr. Robert Miller, until the conclusion of the process. Maternal visits are temporarily suspended, pending a complete psychological evaluation of Mrs. Deborah Miller, who must also undergo specific therapy for abusive behavior control. Deborah rose abruptly. Her face contorted in an expression Robert had never seen before, pure fury, without any disguise. "This is absurd, an injustice," she shouted, completely losing her composure. "They're believing the lies of a manipulated child. I am a perfect mother. Perfect." The judge banged her gavel forcefully. "Mrs. Miller, control yourself, or you will be removed from the room." Vance tried to calm his client, but Deborah pushed him away. Advancing towards the judge's bench, "You don't know who I am. You don't know who you're dealing with." Two bailiffs quickly approached, restraining Deborah, who continued to shout threats. "This won't stand. I have influence. I have money. You will regret this." The shocking scene confirmed exactly what all the documents and testimonies had suggested. Behind the facade of a perfect mother and philanthropic socialite, there was a dangerously unstable and controlling woman. As Deborah was escorted out, still shouting threats, Judge Clare addressed Robert. "Mr. Miller, I recommend caution in the coming weeks. Mrs. Miller's reaction suggests she may attempt other measures to regain control of the situation. I suggest you keep your daughter in your constant company and inform the school of the court's decision." Robert nodded, still stunned by the outburst he had just witnessed. "Thank you, Your Honor. I will take all necessary precautions." Leaving the Royal Courts of Justice, Robert knew the battle was far from over. Deborah had resources, connections, and now a desire for revenge fueled by public humiliation. But he also had something he didn't possess before, the absolute clarity of his mission as a father. During the drive to Sophia's school, Robert made a call. "Thomas, Robert Miller here." The documents were decisive. "The judge granted me temporary custody." "Great," the journalist replied. "And about our conversation yesterday, can I tell this story?" Robert hesitated for a moment. Exposing the situation publicly would mean opening Sophia's life to public scrutiny, something that could be traumatic for the girl. On the other hand, how many other children might be suffering in silence, just as his daughter had suffered? "Yes," he finally decided, "but with some conditions. Sophia's identity must be protected, no photos or details that could directly identify her, and I want to review the material before publication." "Agreed," Thomas confirmed. "I'll start working on it immediately. This story needs to be told." Upon arriving at the school, Robert found Sophia playing in the courtyard with Clara and other children. For a moment, he just watched, his heart tight with emotion. His daughter laughed, ran, seemed like a normal child for the first time in a long time. When she spotted him, she ran towards him. "Daddy, did you come to pick me up today?" she asked, surprised by the change in routine. "I did, Princess," he replied, crouching down to her height. "I have good news. From now on, you'll be living with me, okay? Just the two of us, together." Sophia looked at him with wide eyes, a mix of hope and fear. "What about Mummy?" "Mummy. She needs some time to get better," Robert explained, choosing his words carefully. "She's going to see some doctors who will help her not to be so angry." Sophia nodded slowly, processing the information. Then, to Robert's surprise, she hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. That simple thank you contained a world of meaning that broke Robert's heart. A 7-year-old child shouldn't have to say thank you for being safe, for having food, for not being unfairly punished. "Shall we go home?" he invited, holding his daughter's small hand. Sophia smiled and waved to Clara, who was watching from afar. Beside Clara was Patricia, who exchanged a meaningful look with Robert, a look that said, "You did it." In the days that followed, news of the Millers, separation and the abuse allegations began to circulate in London social circles. Thomas Scott's report, published in a major newspaper, bore the impactful title, "Hunger as Punishment," The hidden face of child abuse in elite families. The text did not mention names, but accurately described the case of an influential businesswoman who deprived her own daughter of food as a form of control and punishment. Even more shocking was the revelation of similar patterns of behavior in a charity that served underprivileged children, suggesting a systemic problem of abuse covered up by influence and money. The report generated a wave of reactions. Other publications began to investigate similar cases, and soon complaints emerged against other public figures who, behind photogenic smiles and speeches about child welfare, hid abusive behaviors. While the world around him seethed with revelations, Robert focused on rebuilding life with Sophia. The apartment in Notting Hill, once a temporary space, was now being adapted to be a permanent home. One of the bedrooms was transformed into a playful space, with low shelves filled with children's books, a table for drawing and painting, and a dollhouse that Sophia had helped choose. The routine now included breakfast prepared together, Robert taking Sophia to school before going to the office, which he now rarely frequented after 5 p.m, afternoons at the park when weather permitted, and reading sessions before bedtime. On the living room walls, new photos replaced the abstract paintings that once dominated the room. Sophia at the zoo, Robert and Sophia making chocolate fudge in the kitchen, the two of them building sandcastles at the beach. One Saturday morning, as they prepared pancakes together, the phone rang. It was Julia, Robert's assistant, and with urgent news. "Robert, I just got a call from a contact at the newspaper. Deborah gave an exclusive interview to the Spectator magazine. She's counter-attacking." Robert's stomach sank. "What did she say?" "The article comes out tomorrow, but my contact gave me a preview of the content. She's portraying you as a controlling husband who isolated her socially and is now using your daughter for revenge. She says you were always absent, that you left Sophia's upbringing entirely in her hands, and now you want to play the hero father." Robert looked at Sophia, who was engrossed in drawing faces on her pancakes with chocolate syrup, oblivious to the conversation. "Does she have any proof of these accusations?" "Nothing concrete, as far as I know. But she's hired a new public relations team, and they're working hard to rebuild her image. The strategy seems to be to cast doubt on everything, to create an alternative narrative where she is the victim." After hanging up, Robert sat at the kitchen table, trying to process the information. Sophia, noticing her father's change in mood, approached with a plate. "I made a special pancake for you," she said, pushing the plate towards him. The pancake had a smiling chocolate face and fruit for hair. "It's you." Robert couldn't help but smile at the simple, loving gesture. "It's beautiful, Sophia, thank you." "Are you sad?" the girl asked in toy, with the perceptiveness children often show. "I'm not sad," he replied, pulling her into a hug. "I'm just thinking about some complicated adult things." "Things about Mummy?" Sophia asked, surprising him with her perception. Robert hesitated, unsure how to answer. The psychologist had recommended honesty, but age-appropriate. "Yes, some things about Mummy, but it's nothing you need to worry about, okay? My job is to sort out these complicated things." Sophia nodded, seeming to accept the answer. Then, with the disarming naturalness of children, she completely changed the subject. "Can we go to the park today? Clara said there's a new slide." "Of course we can," Robert replied, relieved by the change of topic. "And how about we invite Clara and her mum too?" Sophia's eyes lit up. "Yes. Aunt Patricia makes very good picnics." While Sophia ran to choose what outfit she would wear to the park, Robert made another call, this time to Dr. Felicity. He explained about Deborah's interview and asked about possible legal implications. "It was expected," the lawyer replied, showing no surprise. "People like Deborah don't accept defeat easily. But don't worry, Robert. We have concrete evidence, medical reports, consistent testimonies. An emotional interview might generate public sympathy, but it doesn't change the legal facts." "What if she tries something more direct?" Robert asked, expressing the fear that had been growing since the hearing. "Are you referring to an attempt to take Sophia?" Felicity's voice grew more serious. "I won't lie. It's a possibility we should consider. Deborah has lost not only custody of her daughter, but also her public reputation. Cornered people can make desperate decisions. What should I do?" First, inform the school. They need to know that only you are authorized to pick up Sophia. Under no circumstances should she be handed over to her mother or anyone sent by her. Second, avoid very predictable routines for a while. Vary times, routes, places you frequent. And third, I will request a restraining order from the judge, considering Deborah's aggressive behavior shown at the hearing. After hanging up, Robert felt an even greater weight on his shoulders. The idea of living under constant vigilance, fearing that Deborah might try something against Sophia, was exhausting. But he knew he couldn't let his guard down, not when his daughter's safety was at stake. That afternoon, at the park, watching Sophia play with Clara on the new slide, Robert shared his concerns with Patricia, who had become a friend and confidant in recent months. "Do you know what scares me most?" he confessed, as they arranged the picnic blanket. "It's that I don't recognize her anymore. The Deborah I knew, whom I married, was controlled, a perfectionist, yes, but I never imagined she was capable of doing what she did to Sophia." Patricia nodded, understanding. "Sometimes people only show us what they want us to see. They create personas so convincing that even they themselves believe them." "How will I explain all this to Sophia when she grows up?" Robert asked, watching his daughter in the distance. "How do I tell a child that her own mother deliberately hurt her?" "One day at a time, Robert," Patricia replied, placing her hand gently over his. "Sophia is a strong and intelligent girl, and she has you. That makes all the difference." Patricia's touch brought a sense of comfort Robert hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at her with gratitude and something more, something he wasn't yet ready to name, but which grew silently with each meeting, each conversation, each shared moment. The rest of the afternoon passed in a bubble of almost perfect normality, the children playing, the adults talking about light subjects, the late afternoon sun painting the London sky in shades of orange and pink. For a few hours, Robert allowed himself to forget the worries, the threats, the ongoing legal proceedings. But reality awaited him upon returning home. On his phone, 3 missed calls from Thomas Scott and a message, "Urgent. We need to talk. I've discovered something about Regina Maxwell and the charity that changes everything." While Sophia was taking a bath, humming a children's song she had learned at school, Robert returned the journalist's call. "What did you find out, Thomas?" "Not just food deprivation," the journalist replied, his voice tense. "I've been investigating the charity for weeks and found a much larger scheme. Regina was embezzling donations, overcharging for services, using the children merely as a facade to raise funds that went into personal accounts. And Deborah was involved up to her neck." "Are you sure about this?" Robert asked, shocked. "Absolutely. I have bank statements, testimonies from former employees, even a repentant accountant who kept 2 sets of books. I'm publishing everything next week, as soon as I finish organizing the evidence." "And what does this mean for our case?" "It means Deborah has much more to lose now. It's not just Sophia's custody or her social reputation. We're talking about potential criminal charges, Robert. She could face prison." The news hit Robert like a punch. As much as Deborah had done, the idea of seeing her imprisoned, of Sophia having to grow up knowing her mother was in jail, was devastating. "Thomas, I need to process this. I'll call you tomorrow." After hanging up, Robert sat in the darkened living room with only the bedside lamp on, trying to organize his thoughts. The situation had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. What had started as a battle for Sophia's custody was now turning into a potential criminal scandal. "Daddy?" Sophia's voice brought him back to reality. She was standing in the doorway, already in her pajamas, her hair still damp from the bath. "You didn't come to say goodnight?" "Sorry, Princess. I was distracted," he said, getting up. "Come on. Story time." As he read The Little Prince, Why to Sophia, the chapter she had chosen for that night, Robert tried to focus only on the present moment, on the privilege of having his daughter safe by his side. But his mind kept returning to Thomas's revelations and what they would mean for everyone involved. Sophia fell asleep in the middle of the story, as she often did. Robert stayed a few more minutes just watching her sleep, her chest rising and falling at a calm pace. Her face finally relaxed, without the signs of anxiety that had once been constant. Back in the living room, he made a decision. He picked up the phone and typed a message to a number he hadn't used in weeks. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the cafe near your apartment. It's important." The reply came almost immediately, surprising him. "I'll be there." Robert took a deep breath, uncertain if he was making the right decision. But something told him that, however difficult it was, he needed to take this step. Not just for Sophia, but also for himself, to finally close a chapter and move on. The next morning, after dropping Sophia off at school with reinforced safety instructions, Robert drove to the cafe in Mayfair. He arrived a few minutes early and chose a discreet table at the back of the establishment, from where he could observe the entrance, exactly at 10 o'clock. Deborah entered the cafe. She looked different from the last time he had seen her in court. Thinner, her face without its usual perfect makeup, visible dark circles under her eyes. She was still elegantly dressed, but without her usual ostentation. She seemed smaller, somehow, less imposing. Their eyes met. For a moment, Robert saw something in her eyes he had never noticed before. Real vulnerability, not staged for cameras or to impress judges. Then she walked to the table and sat opposite him. "Thank you for coming," Robert said, keeping his voice neutral. Deborah nodded slightly. "Your message surprised me. What's so important to warrant this meeting?" Robert studied the face of the woman with whom he had shared years of his life, his daughter's mother, a stranger he had never truly known. Then, in a calm but firm voice, he began to tell her about Thomas's discoveries regarding the charity, the embezzlement, the possible legal consequences. As he spoke, he watched Deborah's expressions change. Surprise, fear, then a resignation that almost seemed like relief, as if she could finally abandon an exhausting facade. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. When he finished, "Why give me this warning?" "I'm not doing this for you," Robert replied honestly. "I'm doing it for Sophia, because no matter what happened, what you did, you are still her mother, and one day, when she's older and asks questions, I want to be able to look her in the eye and say that I did everything I could to resolve the situation in the best possible way." Deborah lowered her eyes to the untouched coffee cup in front of her. When she spoke again, her voice was different, stripped of its usual arrogance. "You think I'm a monster, don't you?" she asked, more as a statement than a real question. "I think you need help." "Deborah," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "What you did to Sophia, what you did to those other children, that's not normal. It's not healthy." "I just wanted her to be perfect," Deborah murmured, so quietly that Robert could barely hear. "Like I always had to be." For the first time, Robert glimpsed something from Deborah's past that she had always kept hidden. Her own childhood, probably marked by impossible demands, by a cruel perfectionism imposed by her parents, which she was now replicating with Sophia. "You have two options," Robert said, returning to the main subject. "You can wait for the scandal to break and face the legal consequences, or you can get ahead of it, cooperate with the investigations, seek psychological treatment, try to repair some of the damage caused." "And what's the difference to you?" she asked, with a flash of her old hostility. "Either way, you get Sophia. The difference is that, in the second scenario, perhaps one day you can rebuild some kind of relationship with your daughter. Not now, not until you're truly better. But in the future, when Sophia is older and can understand that people can change, that they can recognize their mistakes and seek redemption." Deborah looked out the cafe window, at the busy street beyond the glass. Rushing people passed by, oblivious to the drama unfolding at that discreet table. "Are you recording this conversation?" she asked, suddenly suspicious. "No," Robert replied, sincerely. "This isn't a trap, Deborah. It's a chance. Perhaps your last." The silence that followed seemed to carry the weight of all the unspoken words in their years of marriage, of all the masks worn, of all the hidden truths. "I'll think about what you said," Deborah finally replied, getting up. "Is that all?" "Yes," Robert confirmed. "Just one more thing. Whatever you decide, please respect the court order. Don't try to see Sophia. Don't try to contact her until the psychologists authorize it. She's doing well now. She's recovering. Don't do anything that could harm that process." Deborah nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture. Then, without another word, she walked out of the cafe, her posture still elegant, but her shoulders slightly slumped by an invisible weight. Robert remained seated for a few more minutes, feeling a confusing mix of emotions: relief at having done what he believed was right, concern about whether Deborah would truly heed his advice, and a diffuse sadness for what could have been if they were both different people, if they had made different choices. As he left the cafe, the sunny London day greeted him with its characteristic warmth and movement. Robert took a deep breath, feeling curiously lighter. The future was still uncertain, there were still battles to face, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right path, not just as a father, but as a human being. His phone vibrated with a message. It was Patricia. "All good. How was the meeting?" Robert smiled at the screen, feeling that familiar warmth that the mere mention of Patricia now evoked. "Better than I expected," he replied. "I'll tell you more later. Coffee after we pick up the girls from school." The answer came immediately. "Deal. The girls are planning a surprise for both of you. Clara let slip earlier today. Get ready." Putting his phone away, Robert walked to his car with a discreet smile on his lips. Life went on with its complexities, challenges, and, unexpectedly, new possibilities. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting with Deborah at the cafe. Thomas Scott's report on the embezzlement at the Happy Futures charity had been published, causing an earthquake in London social circles. Regina Maxwell was removed from the presidency of the institution, and an external audit was hired to investigate all accounts. Several companies that made regular donations announced the suspension of transfers until the situation was clarified. To Robert's surprise, Deborah had chosen the path he suggested. Even before the report's publication, she contacted the Crown Prosecution Service and made a detailed confession about her involvement in the scheme, agreeing to cooperate with the investigations in exchange for a more lenient plea bargain. Simultaneously, she began treatment with a psychiatrist specializing in personality disorders and eating disorders, publicly acknowledging that she needed help. Deborah's attitude divided opinions. Some saw her move as a mere strategy to reduce possible penalties. Others believed in genuine repentance. Robert Chant, for his part, remained cautiously optimistic. He knew his ex-wife's manipulative capacity too well to accept her transformation without reservations, but he sincerely hoped that this time the change was real, not for him, but for Sophia. That Saturday morning, Robert was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when he heard light footsteps approaching. "Toes, good morning, Princess," he said, without turning around, recognizing the rhythm of Sophia's little steps. "How did you know it was me?" the girl asked, yawning and climbing onto the tall stool at the kitchen counter. "Dad magic," he replied, turning with a smile and placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Did you sleep well?" Sophia nodded, fork already in hand. Her cheeks were fuller now, the fragile and malnourished appearance giving way to a healthy look of a well-cared-for child. "I dreamed I was on a big boat." "Really? And where was this boat going?" "To an island with lots of animals," she replied between bites. "There was a blue giraffe." Robert smiled at pouring himself coffee. These simple moments of morning conversation had become his favorite part of the day. The routine established in recent weeks brought a sense of normalcy that both desperately needed. "What are we going to do today?" Sophia asked, finishing her orange juice. "Well, we have a few options," Robert replied, sitting beside her. "We can go to the park, to the cinema, or—" he paused dramatically, "to London Zoo." Sophia's eyes sparkled. "Zoo? Can we see the giraffes, even if they're not blue?" "Of course we can. And if you want, afterwards we'll stop at the bookstore and buy a book about giraffes. What do you think?" "Yes," Sophia exclaimed, almost knocking over her empty glass in her enthusiasm. "Can I wear my yellow dress with polka dots?" "Perfect for seeing giraffes," Robert agreed, stroking his daughter's hair. While Sophia ran to get dressed, Robert's phone vibrated with a message. It was Patricia. "Good morning." Clara woke up talking non-stop about a science project she has to do, something about observing animals. "Any chance you two are free today for a visit to the zoo?" Robert chuckled at the coincidence. "I was about to invite you for that very thing. Sophia wants to see giraffes, preferably blue ones. Shall we meet there in an hour? Perfect, Patricia replied. Clara will be beaming, and I promise not to disappoint Sophia with the lack of blue giraffes. Maybe we can make up for it with blue ice cream later. The exchange of messages left Robert with a smile on his face. His friendship with Patricia had naturally evolved in recent months into something more, although both were being careful, especially because of the children. Sophia had already gone through so many traumatic changes that they agreed to move slowly, allowing the relationship to develop organically, without pressure. 2 hours later, the two families strolled through the zoo. Sophia and Clara ran a few yards ahead, stopping at each enclosure with exclamations of delight, while Robert and Patricia walked side by side, chatting comfortably. "How is she reacting to the news about Deborah?" Patricia asked in a low voice, while the girls were distracted watching the monkeys. "Surprisingly well," Robert replied. "The psychologist has been incredible, explaining everything in terms she can understand. Sophia knows her mother is sick and needs doctors to get better. And you, how are you coping with all this?" Robert reflected for a moment before answering. "It's strange. On one hand, I feel angry about what Sophia went through, about the time I lost not realizing what was happening. On the other, there's a certain relief in seeing Deborah finally acknowledging her problems and seeking help." Patricia nodded, understanding. It's normal to feel contradictory things in a situation like this. There's no manual for it. The hardest part is explaining to Sophia why her mother can't see her yet, Robert confessed. Even with everything that happened, she still misses Deborah. It's her natural instinct. "Children have an incredible capacity for unconditional love," Patricia observed. "It's what makes them so vulnerable and, at the same time, so resilient." They were interrupted by Sophia and Clara, who came running, excited to have discovered that the giraffe feeding show would begin in 10 minutes. The four headed to that area of the zoo, the girls skipping ahead, already inseparable as only children can be. During the show, while the zookeeper explained curiosities about giraffes and the children watched fascinated as the animals ate leaves offered on elevated platforms, Robert felt Patricia's hand discreetly seek his. He intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling a wave of gratitude for the silent support she represented in his life. The day at the zoo passed quickly, filled with laughter, ice cream, photos taken, and an illustrated book about giraffes bought at the gift shop. In the late afternoon, the two families said goodbye in the parking lot, with promises to meet again the next day for a Sunday lunch. Upon arriving home, while Sophia was bathing, Robert received an unexpected call. It was Dr. Felicity Lane, his lawyer. "Robert, sorry to bother you on the weekend, but I thought you'd want to know immediately. I received a formal notification from Deborah's lawyer." Robert's heart quickened. "What does she want now?" "Actually, it's surprisingly reasonable," Felicity replied, with a note of surprise in her voice. "She is formally requesting the initiation of a gradual reintegration process with Sophia, fully supervised, and following all psychologists' recommendations. No private visits or shared custody for now, just controlled meetings in a neutral environment with the presence of professionals." "Do you think it's sincere?" Robert asked, still suspicious. "Well, the request comes with detailed medical reports showing her treatment progress, and the proposal completely respects the limits set by the judge. Honestly, it seems like a step in the right direction." After hanging up, Robert sat on the sofa, thoughtful. The possibility of Sophia reuniting with Deborah brought a mix of contradictory emotions. On one hand, he feared his daughter would relive trauma. On the other, he knew that, eventually, this moment would come, and perhaps it was better that it happened in a controlled way, with all possible safeguards. "Daddy, look at my giraffe!" Sophia interrupted his thoughts, entering the living room with the book open to a colorful illustration. "Can I paint one like it tomorrow?" "Of course you can, Princess," Robert smiled, putting his worries aside for now. "How about we read a bit of this book before bed?" Later, with Sophia already asleep, Robert again thought about Deborah's request. He decided to talk to Dr. Marina Day, the child psychologist who supported Sophia, before making any decision. He sent her a message asking for an extra consultation on Monday. The next morning, while Sophia watched cartoons in the living room, Robert received a call from Thomas Scott. "Robert, I just wanted to let you know I'm finalizing a new report on the charity's case. This time focusing on the affected children and the institutional changes being implemented to prevent further abuse. And what's Deborah's legal situation? Robert asked, moving to the office so Sophia wouldn't hear the conversation. Surprisingly stable, the journalist replied. The cooperation agreement is being strictly adhered to, and the information she provided is helping to dismantle the entire embezzlement structure. Regina Maxwell is the one truly in trouble. We've discovered offshore accounts, undeclared luxury apartments, all sorts of ostentation incompatible with an NGO executive's salary. And her psychological treatment? Do you have any information? Hospital sources confirm she has been regularly attending therapy sessions and support groups for eating disorders and anger management. The doctors seem cautiously optimistic, but emphasize it's a long process. After hanging up, Robert returned to the living room, where he found Sophia drawing a giraffe on a large colored paper, using all the markers and crayons she had available. "Look, Daddy, this is the giraffe family," she explained animatedly, pointing to the 4 figures of different sizes she had drawn. "This is Mummy Giraffe, this is Daddy Giraffe, and these are the babies." Robert observed the drawing with a lump in his throat. It was the first time in months Sophia had drawn a complete family, with both maternal and paternal figures. The psychologist had explained that Sophia's drawings were a window into her inner world, and for weeks she had drawn only isolated or partial figures. "It's beautiful, Sophia," he commented, crouching beside her. "You really like families, don't you?" Sophia nodded, concentrating on coloring the smallest baby. "Clara has a daddy who lives far away, you know. She sees him on weekends sometimes." "Yes, I knew," Robert replied, trying to understand where the conversation was going. "Some families are like that. Parents live in different houses, but they are still a family." "Is Mummy going to live far away forever?" Sophia asked abruptly, without looking up from her drawing. The question caught Robert by surprise. Sophia rarely mentioned Deborah spontaneously. "Mummy is living somewhere else now because she needs to be near the doctors who are helping her get better," he explained carefully. "And when she gets better, will she be able to see me?" Robert took a deep breath. "That's a possibility, yes, when the doctors say she's better, and when you feel comfortable with the idea. What do you think about that?" Sophia stopped drawing and looked at her father with a serious expression that seemed out of place on her childish face. "I don't know," she answered honestly, a little happy and a little scared. "That makes perfect sense," Robert assured her, crouching down to her eye level. "You know you can change your mind, right? If when the day comes you don't want to go, that's okay. No one will be angry." Sophia nodded, seeming relieved. "Will Aunt Patricia come with us?" The question caught Robert by surprise. "Would you like her to come?" "Yes," Sophia replied without hesitation. "She's nice and makes me feel brave." The comment warmed Robert's heart. It was clear that Sophia had developed a strong bond with Patricia, something he observed with a mix of joy and caution. "We can ask her if you want." In fact, Robert had already considered asking Patricia to accompany them. Her presence would be a support not only for Sophia, but also for him. The idea of meeting Deborah again, even in a controlled environment, still provoked significant anxiety. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Robert called Patricia and explained the situation. "Sophia specifically asked if you could accompany us to the meeting with Deborah," he concluded. "She said you make her feel brave." "Wow," Patricia replied, visibly moved even through the phone. That means a lot to me." "I completely understand if you don't feel comfortable," Robert hastened. "It's a potentially uncomfortable situation and—" "Robert," Patricia interrupted gently, "of course, I'll go with you. If Sophia wants me there, that's where I'll be." Robert felt a wave of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to. That's what we do for the people we love." The word love hung in the air for a moment, loaded with meaning. Neither of them had used it before, at least not in this context. "Patricia, Robert began, feeling his heart race. "I know," she replied softly. "Me too." A week later, the first supervised meeting between Sophia and Deborah was scheduled at the Family Therapy Center linked to the court. Robert woke up that morning with a knot in his stomach, uncertain how the day would unfold. Seeing Sophia eating breakfast with normal appetite, wearing an outfit she had carefully chosen herself, her favorite dress with cloud print and a blue cardigan, he felt a mix of pride and apprehension. "Are you ready for today?" he asked carefully. Sophia chewed her cereal thoughtfully before answering. "I think so. Dr. Marina said I can leave the room if I get scared." "Exactly," Robert confirmed. "I'll be in the room with you, and Dr. Marina too, and Aunt Patricia will meet us there." Sophia nodded, seeming a little more at ease with that reminder. At 10 o'clock, they arrived at the Family Therapy Center, a modern building with a welcoming environment specially designed for children. Patricia was already waiting for them in the lobby, her comforting smile bringing a sense of normalcy to a day that was far from it. "Hi, superhero," she greeted Sophia, who ran for a hug. "I like your dress. It matches your eyes." Sophia smiled, proud. "I chose it myself." Dr. Marina Day came to greet them and explain the procedure. "We'll use the play therapy room, which has toys and art supplies. Sophia can choose what she wants to do during the meeting. I'll be there the whole time. Guiding the interaction, Robert will also be in the room, and Patricia can wait in the anteroom with a view through the one-way mirror if she prefers." Sophia held Patricia's hand tightly. "I want her to stay close to me." The psychologist smiled gently. "Of course, Sophia. Patricia can stay in the room with us if that makes you more comfortable." As they headed to the designated room, Robert noticed Deborah already waiting in a small adjacent area, accompanied by her therapist. She was dressed simply, without her usual ostentation, her face with minimal makeup. She seemed nervous, repeatedly wringing her hands. Their eyes met briefly, and Robert realized she had really changed, at least physically. She was thinner, with visible dark circles under her eyes, and something different in her gaze, a vulnerability that had previously been carefully hidden. Dr. Marina led Sophia into the room first, allowing her to get used to it. Robert and Patricia followed, taking discreet seats at the back of the room, while Sophia explored the available toys, eventually choosing a set of colorful blocks. "Now we'll invite your mother to come in, okay?" the psychologist asked softly. Sophia nodded, although Robert could perceive the tension in her small shoulders. Instinctively, he felt Patricia squeeze his hand in silent support. When Deborah entered the room, accompanied by her therapist, Sophia looked up from the blocks. For a long moment, mother and daughter just looked at each other, as if each was trying to recognize the other after months of separation. "Hi, Sophia," Deborah finally said, her voice trembling. "Can I sit near you?" Sophia looked at Dr. Marina, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," she replied in a low voice. Deborah sat on the rug, maintaining a respectful distance. "Are you building something with those blocks?" "A castle," Sophia replied, still cautious, but starting to stack the blocks again. "Can I help?" Deborah asked. When Sophia nodded, she began to pass blocks to her daughter, without trying to control the construction, just assisting. Robert watched the interaction with a heavy heart. There was something profoundly painful in seeing this version of Deborah, subdued, insecure, clearly making an effort not to dominate or control. It was like observing a stranger inhabiting the body of the woman he had known. Gradually, the conversation between mother and daughter flowed, still hesitant, but progressively more natural. Sophia talked about her new school, about Clara, about the ballet classes she had started. Deborah listened attentively, asking appropriate questions, showing genuine interest. At one point, when Sophia mentioned that she really liked the new breakfast her father prepared every day, Deborah looked briefly at Robert, something indescribable passing through her gaze. "Your father was always very good in the kitchen," she commented to Sophia. "Better than me." It was the first time Robert had heard Deborah admit any kind of inferiority, even in something as trivial as culinary skills. The meeting lasted an hour, as planned. When Dr. Marina announced that time was running out, Sophia surprised everyone by approaching Deborah and handing her one of the small blocks from the castle they had built together. "For you to remember," she said simply. Deborah's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you, Sophia. I will cherish it." As they left, Robert noticed that Sophia seemed emotionally tired, but not disturbed. In the car, she was unusually silent, looking out the window. "What did you think?" he asked gently, when they were almost home. "Mummy is different," Sophia replied, after a moment of reflection. "Less noisy." The simple description made Robert smile despite the situation. "That's true. She seems calmer now." "Will she get better, Daddy?" Sophia asked, with that mixture of innocence and depth that only children can have. "We're all hoping so, Princess," he answered honestly. "The doctors are helping her. And she's trying hard to get better." Sophia nodded, seeming to accept the answer. After another moment of silence, she asked, "Can we get ice cream on the way? I'm hungry." Robert and Patricia exchanged relieved glances in the rearview mirror. This was the Sophia he knew, practical, resilient, focused on the present moment. "Of course we can. What flavor do you want today?" "Double chocolate with extra sauce," she declared, her humor returning to her voice. That night, after Sophia fell asleep, Robert and Patricia talked in the living room, processing the day's events. "You were right about Deborah changing," Patricia commented, nestled on the sofa beside him. "The difference is visible." "It's strange," Robert admitted. "Seeing someone you've known for so many years transform this way, part of me still expects it to be an act, but another part begins to believe that perhaps she really is confronting her demons." "People can change when they truly want to," Patricia reflected, "especially when confronted with the consequences of their actions so dramatically." "Sophia handled everything better than I expected," Robert commented, still admiring his daughter's resilience. "I think a large part of that is due to you." "To me?" Patricia asked, surprised. "What do you mean? You brought stability, affection, a healthy model of how adults interact with children. Sophia flourishes when she's with you." Patricia smiled, moved. "She's an incredible girl, Robert, and you're an extraordinary father. What you two have built together after everything you've been through is inspiring." He held her face in his hands, looking at her intently. "I don't know what I would have done without you these past few months. You've become essential to us." "You two are essential to me too," she replied, covering his hands with hers. "Clara has never been happier. It's as if we've found the missing pieces of our puzzle." They kissed softly, without haste, like people who are certain there will be many more moments like that ahead. In the weeks that followed, the supervised meetings between Sophia and Deborah continued, becoming increasingly natural. The girl still showed caution, but the initial tension had considerably decreased. Deborah, for her part, seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding a healthy relationship with her daughter, rigorously following all the therapist's guidelines. On a particularly significant afternoon, after the fourth supervised meeting, Deborah asked to speak briefly with Robert in private. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," she began, when they were alone in the small conference room at the Family Therapy Center. "But I wanted to thank you for allowing these meetings, for not poisoning Sophia against me, for giving me this chance that I don't deserve." Robert observed the woman in front of him, now so different from the Deborah he had known, and realized that his anger had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of compassion and caution. "I'm not doing this for you," he replied honestly. "I'm doing it for Sophia. She deserves the chance to have a mother who loves her in a healthy way." "I know," Deborah assented, without the defensive pride that once characterized her. "And I promise I will strive every day to be that mother. The doctors say my disorders, that this will be a constant struggle, but I am committed to the treatment." There was a moment of silence between them, laden with the weight of shared years, of joys and traumas, of a marriage that had transformed into something unrecognizable. "I like her," Deborah said suddenly. "Patricia, she's good for Sophia." The statement surprised Robert. "How did you—" "Sophia talks about her all the time," Deborah explained with a sad smile. "And I saw how you look at each other. It seems real." "It is real," Robert confirmed, not knowing exactly why he felt the need to validate his relationship to his ex-wife. Deborah nodded, absorbing the information. "I'm happy for you, truly." And the most surprising thing was that she seemed sincere. Upon returning to where Patricia and Sophia were waiting for him, Robert felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Not total forgiveness, nor forgetting, Some damages were irreparable, but a kind of peace, a closure that allowed him to look forward without the constant burden of the past. 6 months had passed since the first supervised meeting between Sophia and Deborah. Autumn had arrived in London, painting the trees of Hyde Park red and gold, where Robert watched Sophia run among the fallen leaves, laughing with Clara. The two girls had become inseparable, sharing not only games and secrets, but also a mutual understanding of unconventional families. "They seem so free," Patricia commented, sitting beside Robert on the park bench. "It's hard to believe everything that happened when we see Sophia like this." Robert nodded, a gentle smile on his lips as he watched his daughter. Sophia had fully regained her ideal weight for her age. Her eyes now sparkled with the typical vivacity of an 8-year-old. And the food-related nightmares had practically ceased. The girl who once hid pieces of bread in her pockets, fearing food deprivation, now sat at the table without anxiety, sharing meals naturally. "Dr. Marina said she's officially out of the psychological risk zone," Robert commented, handing a cup of coffee to Patricia. "We'll continue with bi-weekly sessions for a few more months, but only as preventive follow-up." "That's wonderful," Patricia replied, her fingers naturally intertwining with Robert's. "And how are the meetings with Deborah going?" "Surprisingly well. Sophia seems genuinely happy to see her now. It's a different relationship, of course, but healthy." The relationship between mother and daughter had slowly rebuilt itself on completely new foundations. The supervised meetings had progressed to longer visits, still monitored, but with fewer restrictions. Deborah continued her rigorous treatment, participating in individual therapy and support groups for eating disorders and anger management. The plea bargain she had made with the Crown Prosecution Service resulted in community service and financial restrictions, but no prison sentence, allowing her to focus on her personal recovery. Even more impressive was the transformation in her personality. The woman obsessed with control and superficial perfection had given way to someone more humble, more aware of her flaws and limitations. Of course, there were still moments of relapse. Dr. Marina had warned that personality disorders do not completely disappear, they are only managed. But Deborah seemed genuinely committed to her process of change. "Sophia told me that Deborah started volunteering in a children's literacy project," Patricia commented. "It sounds quite different from the charity she was with before." "It's a small program." "Without spotlights or glamour," Robert confirmed. "She spends 3 afternoons a week teaching underprivileged children to read. According to her therapist, it's a way to positively redirect her need for control and perfection." As they talked, Sophia and Clara ran up to them, their cheeks flushed from exercise. "Daddy, can we have hot chocolate?" Sophia asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "There's a cart over there near the lake." "Of course." "Princess," Robert smiled, standing up. "Let's all go." As they walked through the park, Sophia between Robert and Patricia, holding both their hands, and Clara skipping ahead, Robert reflected on how his life had drastically changed in the last year. From the shocking discovery of the mistreatment Sophia suffered to that moment of family normality in the park, the journey had been intense and transformative. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Thomas Scott, the journalist who had investigated the charity's case. "Good news. The audit is complete. All funds embezzled by Regina have been identified and will be redirected to legitimate children's programs. You and Deborah did the right thing. Thank you for trusting me to tell this story." Robert smiled, putting his phone away without replying. That chapter was finally closing, allowing everyone to move forward. At the drinks cart, while the girls seriously deliberated over marshmallows or whipped cream in their hot chocolates, why not both, Patricia observed Robert's serene expression. "You look different today," she commented. "Lighter." "I feel different," he admitted, putting his arm around her shoulders, as if something had finally clicked into place. The night before, Robert had asked Patricia to marry him during a romantic dinner. He had prepared himself. Her answer had been immediate and enthusiastic. They had decided to tell the girls that weekend during a special picnic they were planning. "Are you sure you're ready to take this step?" Patricia asked, still processing her own happiness. "After everything that happened with Deborah." "It's precisely because of everything that happened "That I'm sure," Robert replied, kissing her gently on the forehead. "You showed me how a healthy relationship really works, without masks, without power games, just genuine love and respect." Sophia and Clara returned with their hot chocolates overflowing with marshmallows and whipped cream, interrupting the moment. The four sat on a bench near the lake, enjoying the autumn afternoon, talking about plans for the upcoming Halloween. The girls had decided to dress up as space scientists, inspired by a book about women in astronomy that Patricia had given them. The following Tuesday, during Sophia's regular meeting with Deborah, Robert decided it was time to tell her about his engagement. Normally, he left Sophia with the psychologist and her mother during these visits, returning only to pick her up. But that day he asked to speak with Deborah after the session. When Sophia went with Dr. Marina for an activity in another room, Robert and Deborah sat in the small waiting area, an initially uncomfortable silence hanging between them. "Sophia seems so happy lately," Deborah commented, breaking the silence. "She can't stop talking about the school camp that's coming up. I remember I dreaded camps as a child." "Me too," Robert smiled, remembering his own childhood. "But she's super excited. I think she inherited your adventurous spirit." It was strange how they could now have normal, almost friendly conversations after everything that had happened. They weren't friends, never would be, but they had found a civilized way to coexist for Sophia's sake. "There's something I need to tell you," Robert said, going straight to the point. "I asked Patricia to marry me. We're getting married next summer." Deborah absorbed the information in silence for a moment, her eyes fixed on the disposable coffee cup she held. When she finally looked at him, her face showed a complex mix of emotions. "I'm happy for you, Robert. Truly. Patricia she's exactly what you and Sophia need." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. There was no resentment, no bitterness, just a resigned acceptance and, surprisingly, a kind of relief. "Thank you," he replied, genuinely touched. "We're going to tell Sophia this weekend. I thought you should know first." "She'll love the news." Deborah smiled softly. "You know she's been drawing you four as a family for months, right? In our art therapy sessions." Robert hadn't known that. "Does that not bother you?" Deborah sighed, placing the empty cup aside. "It would bother the old Deborah, the one who saw family as an extension of her perfect public image. But now—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Now I understand that what matters is her happiness, not my wounded feelings or my pride. Sophia deserves a loving, stable family. You two can give her that." "You will always be her mother," Robert assured her, seeing the vulnerability in Deborah's eyes. "Nothing will change that. I know. And I'm working to be a better mother every day." She hesitated before continuing. "My therapist says I'm making significant progress, but I should never forget what happened, so I don't repeat the same mistakes. The important thing is to move forward," Robert replied. "All of us." When Sophia returned, skipping after her session with Dr. Marina, she hugged her father and then, after a moment of hesitation, hugged Deborah too. It was a gesture that still surprised Robert, to see the naturalness with which Sophia now interacted with her mother, without the fear that had once paralyzed her. "Next week, can I bring my dream journal?" Sophia asked Deborah. "I'm drawing all the strange dreams like you taught me." "Of course, darling," Deborah smiled. "I can't wait to see them." It was interesting how Deborah, despite all her past flaws and mistakes, had found healthy ways to connect with her daughter through shared interests. Art therapy, in particular, had proven to be a powerful channel of communication between them. On the way home, Sophia was unusually talkative, describing in detail the activities she had done with her mother and Dr. Marina. Robert listened attentively, fascinated by how his daughter navigated with growing confidence between her two worlds, everyday life with him and Patricia, and regular meetings with Deborah. "Did you know Mummy also dreams about giraffes sometimes?" Sophia commented, still obsessed with these animals since the zoo visit. "She said she's going to take me to see real giraffes when the judge lets us go out alone." "That would be lovely," Robert replied, genuinely happy to see his daughter's enthusiasm. "Maybe next year, when everything is more settled." Sophia nodded with the seriousness of someone who understood more than her age would suggest. "Dr. Marina said Mummy is getting stronger in her head, that it's like a muscle that needs exercise." "Doctor," Marina is right, Robert confirmed. And you're helping Mummy a lot with that exercise. I know, Sophia replied with quiet confidence. That's why I always tell her when I'm happy, not just when I'm sad. Dr. Marina said that's important. The simple comment caught Robert by surprise. Sophia had intuitively understood something many adults never grasped, the value of sharing both joys and sorrows, the importance of emotional balance in relationships. You're a very special girl, you know, he said, reaching for her hand over the gear shift. I know, Sophia replied with a mischievous smile. Everyone keeps telling me that. The weekend arrived with perfect weather for the planned picnic. Robert and Patricia had chosen a quiet spot in Regent's Park, less crowded than Hyde Park, to tell the girls about the wedding. They had prepared a basket with all the children's favorite snacks and even a small cake with the message, "We're going to be a family." Sophia and Clara were engrossed in feeding the ducks in a small nearby pond while the adults arranged the checkered blanket and snacks. Nervous? Patricia asked, noticing the tension in Robert's hands as he arranged the plates. A little, he admitted. Even knowing Sophia has probably already figured out what's going on. That girl doesn't let anything past her. Patricia laughed, agreeing. Clara asked me last night if I was going to be Sophia's new mum. I tried to explain that it would be more like a second mum, that Deborah would always be her mum. And what did she say? That she already knew that because Sophia explained that some children are lucky enough to have lots of people who look after them. Patricia smiled at the memory. Those two are wiser than many adults I know. When the girls returned, excited after their duck expedition, Robert and Patricia exchanged nervous glances before asking them to sit down. We have some important news to share with you, Robert began, holding Patricia's hand. Are you getting married? Sophia asked directly, leaving the adults momentarily speechless. How did you know? Patricia recovered first, looking surprised at the girl. Sophia shrugged, as if it were obvious. You're always kissing when you think we're not looking. And Daddy hid a jewelry box in his sock drawer, and you're acting weird, like super polite to each other. Clara nodded vigorously, agreeing with her friend. And Mummy was trying on different hairstyles in front of the mirror last night. She only does that when she's nervous about something important. The adults laughed, relieved and amused by the children's perceptiveness. Yes, we are getting married, Robert confirmed, pulling the small cake from the cooler. Next summer. What do you two think about that? I think it's great, Clara exclaimed immediately. Does that mean we're all going to live together? Can I share a room with Sophia? It's a possibility. Patricia smiled, relieved by her daughter's enthusiastic reaction. We need to talk about the details. But that's the idea, yes. All eyes turned to Sophia, who had not yet spoken. She looked thoughtfully at the cake, as if fully absorbing the idea. Sophia, Robert called gently. What do you think, Princess? I think, she began, looking up with a growing smile, that we need a dog. There was a moment of surprised silence, followed by relieved laughter. A dog? Patricia repeated. Yes. Every family needs a dog, Sophia explained with irrefutable childish logic. It can be a small one, so it doesn't destroy the apartment. I think we can consider that possibility, Robert agreed, exchanging amused glances with Patricia. But does that mean you're happy with the wedding news? Of course, Sophia replied, as if it were obvious. Now can we eat the cake? I'm starving. The naturalness with which the girls accepted the news was both a relief and a confirmation that they were on the right path. As they cut the cake and distributed the pieces, the conversation flowed animatedly about the wedding plans, which would be simple and intimate, only with close friends and family, and about the possibility of moving to a new house, with a garden for the future dog. Will Mummy be able to come to the wedding? Sophia asked suddenly. Surprising the adults again, Robert and Patricia exchanged uncertain glances. The question had not yet been discussed. Well, that's something we need to talk about calmly, Robert replied carefully. What do you think? Sophia considered the question seriously. I think it would be nice if she could go. She's trying to be a better person. Dr. Marina said so. We'll think about it carefully, Patricia promised, touched by Sophia's capacity for forgiveness and understanding. It's very generous of you to want to include your mother on such a special day. It's not just that, Sophia explained, licking icing from her fingers. "It's because if she doesn't come, who will walk me down the aisle? Because you'll be waiting at the front, right, Daddy?" Sophia's practical logic drew smiles from everyone. "Well, that's something we'll definitely have to figure out," Robert agreed, hugging his daughter. The rest of the day passed in a bubble of quiet happiness. The four played frisbee, had a picnic, and enthusiastically planned the details of the life they would build together. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set, Clara fell asleep in Patricia's lap, exhausted from playing. Sophia, still alert, sat beside her father, watching the sky change colors. "Daddy." "Yes, Princess." "Remember when you picked me up that time when I was very hungry?" Robert's heart ached at the mention of that terrible day. "Of course, I remember." "I knew you would come," she said simply, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's why I called. I knew you would save me." The absolute trust in Sophia's voice brought tears to Robert's eyes, even in the darkest moments. When she was being deprived of something as basic as food, his daughter had never lost faith in him. "I will always protect you, Sophia," he promised, hugging her tightly. "Always." "I know," she replied, yawning. "And now we have Aunt Patricia too, and Clara, and soon the dog. It's a big family." "It's our family," Robert smiled, exchanging emotional glances with Patricia, who had overheard the conversation. "Built our way." In the months that followed, many changes occurred. Robert and Patricia found a spacious house in Hampstead Heath, with a small garden perfect for the children and for the much-desired dog, which turned out to be a caramel-colored mongrel adopted from a shelter, promptly named Biscuit by Sophia, in a humorous reference to her past food deprivation. The question of inviting Deborah to the wedding was naturally resolved when, in one of their joint therapy sessions, Deborah suggested that it might be best for everyone if she did not attend the ceremony, but offered to help Sophia get ready and take her to the church. It was a compromise that demonstrated her emotional growth, the ability to put her daughter's well-being above her own desires or discomforts. Deborah's psychological treatment progressed consistently. Her agreement with the justice system had been strictly adhered to, and she began to rebuild her professional life on more solid foundations, now working on a nutritional education project for underprivileged children, a symbolic form of reparation for the harm she had caused. As for Regina Maxwell, the former president of the Happy Futures charity, she was eventually convicted of embezzlement and tax fraud, receiving a 4-year sentence under a semi-open regime. The case, widely publicized by the media, sparked a wave of audits in similar organizations and led to the creation of more rigorous oversight mechanisms for institutions working with vulnerable children. One Saturday morning, about 3 weeks before the wedding, Robert was making pancakes in the kitchen of their new home, while the girls played in the garden with Biscuit. Patricia had gone for a final wedding dress fitting, insisting on the tradition that the groom should not see her dressed before the ceremony. The phone rang. It was Thomas Scott, the journalist who had become a family friend. "Robert, I have news I thought you'd like to hear. That report on the charity and child abuse won the National Journalism Award." "That's fantastic, Thomas. Congratulations." "Thank you, but the credit isn't just mine. If you hadn't trusted me, if you hadn't had the courage to report what was happening to Sophia, none of this would have come to light." Robert felt a wave of emotion as he realized the broader impact of what they had experienced. Sophia's suffering, his own painful journey of discovery and confrontation, had triggered changes that now protected other children. "I wanted to invite you all to the awards ceremony," Thomas continued. "You, Patricia, the girls, you are part of this story." "We'd be honored," Robert replied. "And I'm sure Sophia will love getting dressed up for a fancy ceremony." After hanging up, Robert went to the back door, watching Sophia and Clara run with Biscuit in the garden. Their laughter filled the morning air, a sound that still deeply moved him after everything they had been through. Sophia spotted him and ran towards him, her hair disheveled by the wind, her cheeks flushed with health and joy. "Daddy!" Biscuit learned to give paw. "Want to see?" "Of course I do," he smiled, crouching down to her height. "But first, guess who called? Thomas. Remember him? The journalist who wrote about us?" "That's right. He won a big award for that report, and he invited us to the ceremony." Sophia considered the information for a moment, her expression becoming serious. "The report that told what happened to me and Mummy." "Yes," Robert confirmed, attentive to her reaction. "Guy, but remember, he didn't use our real names or show our pictures. It was about helping other children who might be going through the same thing." Sophia nodded, processing the information. "And did it help? Other children?" "It helped a lot," Robert assured her. "Because of that report, many people started paying more attention to children who might be suffering, even in families that seemed perfect on the outside. Some laws were changed. New rules were created for charities that work with children." A small smile appeared on Sophia's lips. "So what happened to me served for something good." "It served for many good things," Robert confirmed, moved by his daughter's maturity. "But the best of all was making me understand what really matters in life. You taught me to be a real father, Sophia." The girl smiled widely and threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too. Princess, more than anything in the world." In that moment, with the morning sun bathing the garden of their new home, the smell of pancakes coming from the kitchen, and the sound of Clara's and Biscuit's laughter in the background, Robert felt a deep certainty settle in his heart. The journey had been difficult, sometimes devastating, but it had led all of them exactly where they were meant to be. The family they had built, unconventional, imperfect, but deeply loving, was proof that even from the most painful situations, new beginnings could emerge. Sophia, who had once whispered a desperate plea for help into a phone, now ran free and confident, knowing she would never again go hungry, neither for food nor for love. And for Robert, in the entrepreneur who once lived only for work, isolated in his glass tower, this was the greatest victory of all. 2 weeks after the wedding, which had been an intimate and moving celebration, with Sophia proudly led down the aisle by a visibly emotional Deborah, the newly formed family was gathered in the living room of their new home. Patricia helped Clara with a complicated homework assignment, while Robert and Sophia organized an album with photos from the ceremony. "Look how pretty Clara was in this one," Sophia commented, pointing to a photo where her friend, now officially her sister, smiled broadly in her flower girl dress. "And Biscuit with his bow tie." Robert chuckled, remembering the agitated dog trying to pull off the accessory throughout the ceremony. "It was your idea to have Biscuit as a page boy, remember?" "Of course, he's family too," Sophia replied with conviction, turning the page of the album. The next photo showed a moment that had surprised everyone: Sophia hugging Deborah after the ceremony, both smiling genuinely for the camera. It was a powerful image of reconciliation and healing. "You both looked beautiful in that photo," Robert commented softly. Sophia looked at the image thoughtfully. "Mummy cried when I gave her the small bouquet. She said she didn't deserve it." "And what did you say?" "That everyone deserves flowers sometimes," Sophia replied simply. "That's what Dr. Marina taught me." Robert smiled, once again impressed by his daughter's intuitive wisdom. Sophia's ability to process the trauma she had experienced and transform it into understanding and compassion was extraordinary. "You know, Sophia," he said, gently closing the album, "you are the bravest person I know." "Me?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Why?" "Because even after everything you went through, you can still see the good in people. You can forgive. You can love without fear." Sophia considered this for a moment, with that serious expression that made her seem much older than her 8 years. "It's not hard," she finally concluded. "We just need to remember that everyone is sometimes hungry for different things." The depth of the observation caught Robert by surprise. "What do you mean?" "Well, I was hungry for food," Sophia explained, as if it were obvious. "But Mummy was hungry to be perfect, and that made her sick in her head. Aunt Regina was hungry for money. Some people are hungry to make other people sad." She shrugged. "Everyone is hungry for something." "And you, Sophia, what are you hungry for now?" Robert asked, genuinely curious about how his daughter saw herself. Sophia smiled widely, revealing the gap left by a recently lost baby tooth. "Now, for chocolate ice cream, and then, more seriously, and to be happy forever." "All of us." Robert hugged his daughter, too emotional to speak. Across the room, Patricia looked up from Clara's homework and smiled at them, a silent promise hanging in the air between the adults. They would do everything in their power to fulfill Sophia's simple and profound wish. Together, as the family they had chosen to be,